Welcome to the Unstuck podcast. I'm your host, Sean Miner. This weekly no-fluff mindset show arms you with the practical tools you need to get unstuck so you can get exactly what you want out of life. Remember, when you change your mind, your life will follow. Let's get into today's episode. Hey there, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Unstuck. Thank you all for joining me yet again. And we have another setting the stage episode, just giving you a little more background on why we're talking about what we're talking about here on Unstuck, what it all means to you, why it's important, all that good stuff. We have another one of those coming up shortly. First, I just want to give the biggest hug to you all. I was blown away by the response of the first few episodes of Unstuck. It's always a gamble when you put something out into the world, how it's going to be received. And you all blew me away with your kindness and your excitement for what's to come. I just have never felt so much love in a matter of days in my life. So thank you all so much. We've gotten a great response as far as ladies sharing the show with their friends, loved ones, family members, which is fabulous. Sharing on their entire Instagram feed, also amazing. And writing reviews, which are so incredibly helpful to the success of this show. So if you have done that, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I cannot give you the amount of gratitude over a mic that I want to. If you were here in person, you'd be getting a giant, suffocating hug. But just know that's what I'm putting out into the universe for you. You are getting all the high vibes. You're giving. The act of giving is one of the best ways to increase your vibration. And you did that. So thank you all very, very much. I, again, am so thrilled with the response. It means so much to me to be able to bring you something that I'm very passionate about, and to get a positive response is the best. All right, let's get into today's episode, which is all about our thoughts. Why do we think what we think? Now that we know that those thoughts are dictating your vibration. So it would really make sense to dive in deeper and understand our thoughts. Where are they coming from? Why do we have them? Why are they so darn hard to change? It will all make sense after this episode. I'm going to start with a quote from Mahatma Gandhi. This is not your key point, but it will kind of tie into that. Here's the quote. Your beliefs become your thoughts. Your thoughts become your words. Your words become your actions. Your actions become your habits. Your habits become your values. Your values become your destiny. Again, that's from Gandhi. Beautiful quote. I really think that that would be something, if you're struggling with any of this, go back, find that quote, put it as a wallpaper on your phone or on your desktop, and have that as a reminder. But here is our key point. I'm going to kind of paraphrase quite a bit that quote and say, our beliefs drive our thoughts drive our emotions, and our emotions drive our actions. So those are the things we're going to get into a little deeper today, because that will really start creating the change that you want to see if you just focus on those three pieces: your beliefs, your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions. That is 4. That is not 3. Take that back. These 4 things. Let's focus on those. Before we do, I want to break down how our minds work a little bit. I think a lot of you probably know at least some of this. For me, I knew of it. It was kind of like this thing that I had heard, read, seen, but didn't really ever connect the dots or take much time to understand anything more about. And then once I really learned how the mind works, so much clicked. Like everything began to make sense as to why I do what I do, think what I think, respond the way I respond. And I want to hopefully do that for you to hear, just even in a very brief way. We don't have to get into the nitty gritty, and we won't get into the nitty gritty here again. We're keeping it practical. We're keeping it real life. If this interests you, there are plenty of books and blog posts and all kinds of things that you can find out to dive deeper into how your mind works. This is kind of high level. Just know that. So our minds are divided into two parts, the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. Your conscious mind is your present consciousness. What's going on in this moment? So for instance, if someone asked to pass the salt, you would make the connection, pass the salt to that person, not really think much of it. If someone asked you what's 1 + 1, you would very easily know the answer was 2 and say that out loud. It is what we access in immediate life, kind of like our to-do list. It's just those little random thoughts we kind of have throughout the day. This is 10%, around 10%. We don't know actual figures, but around 10% of your mind. The other 90% is the subconscious and unconscious mind. And just to make things a little easier and clearer, I'm only going to reference the subconscious mind when I'm really talking about both. And I'll kind of describe at least how I think of the subconscious mind and unconscious mind working together. But just so you know, when I say subconscious, I mean both. It just is way easier to do it that way. Your subconscious mind is responsible for collecting, storing, and retrieving data. You can kind of think of it as like the memory on your computer, except it's endless. You just keep putting things, you keep saving things into your memory drive, but it's endless. It will just keep storing and storing and storing. You will never get that your storage bank is full. And it has been storing this data from the moment you came to be. In fact, this part of your brain is the very first to develop. So that means that it stores a lot of things from your childhood. That is when it is in its main development stage. And those things that it stores from childhood are still there, and you are still carrying out actions based on that stored data today. Its only concern, your subconscious mind, it only cares about the fact that you respond exactly as you have been programmed. So everything that it stores, whether it was from when you were 2 years old or yesterday, it takes that to be true. It doesn't know the difference between true and false. It just knows that you have stored that data. That means it is true, and it will now operate to make sure that you respond as according to that truth. It feels like that is your master plan. Anything that it is holding for you is deemed its master plan, and it will carry out that master plan no matter what. Now, here's how they work together, your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. I'm going to give you a little bit of an analogy. This is how I like to think of it, one of the many ways that pops into my head when I think of conscious and subconscious mind. You're at a restaurant. You sit down, the waiter gets you some water, you look at the menu, and you decide what you want. The waiter then answers any quick questions you might have, just little one-off things. But then once you know your order, the waiter takes your order back to the kitchen where there is a huge production going on. There's a whole crew of people using what they know about how to make your order based on their training, their skills, what they've learned on the job, what they've learned through other people. And then out comes your perfect plate of food. So the waiter, you can think of the waiter as your conscious mind. It's answering the little one-off questions that are very easy, don't need the back staff to answer. It gets the water, it does the menial tasks. But then once it gets to this other part where it needs more action, more people, more work involved, it goes back to the subconscious mind, which is the kitchen. And that is where all of the memory of how to do that dish is put into practice. So that is where the subconscious mind comes into play and makes sure that exactly what you have put in, that order you have put in, comes out exactly right, perfectly right, according to, again, that master plan or that master recipe. And then in some cases, if there's a special order, say, perhaps, they have to go, the subconscious mind / cooks have to go all the way back into the very back freezer to get this very specific special ingredient for that very specific special order that they don't really use that often. They kind of even forget it's there. But then this one special order comes in and they need that ingredient. They go way back into the back a little deeper to the unconscious mind. So that's where, we kind of have the flow of the mind. But again, you can see we're all back in the kitchen. So that's why we can kind of think of subconscious mind and unconscious mind grouped together. It's just how far back do we have to go into that kitchen to get the data or the ingredients for the recipe, however you want to think of it. Another way I like to think about it, picture really any store. I feel like at this point, you walk in, it's a tiny little storefront. I almost think of like a cell phone place. It's like you look at all the cell phones and the tablets, you decide which one you want, and then everything else is done in the back, whether you need to get a new phone or you need to repair your old phone or you want to see if there's a case for your phone. Everything, they have to go to the back. They have to go to the back. They have to go to the back. And it's like this massive production back there that no one really can see, but it's back there. And then however far back they have to go in the storage unit or the warehouse is kind of that different area of your subconscious versus unconscious mind. All right, so now hopefully one of those analogies sits well with you, or you can at least understand the difference between the conscious things that you think every single day and those experiences that have been stored. Now let's break up each of those 4 components I talked about earlier, starting with beliefs. A personal belief is an acceptance that something about yourself or your life is true. So it's acceptance that it is true. It's not that it is true. It can definitely be not true. But you have accepted, or your mind has accepted, that that thing about yourself or life is true. Self-beliefs are so powerful that the evaluations will strongly influence the career you seek, the relationship you're in or you pursue, how much money you do or don't make, your health, your weight, and ultimately just basically everything going on in your life. And limiting beliefs are the negative, often false opinions that we have about life and ourselves, again, that we have taken to be true, whether we know it or not. Your mind has taken to be true. They drive and direct our behavior either positively or negatively. Obviously, the limiting beliefs are negative, so they are going to negatively impact your behavior and your life and your emotions, all the things we're going to talk about today. But then, of course, there are some personal beliefs that are positive. And again, whether they're true or not, you are reacting based on those beliefs, and positive things could be coming about. So it's not all negative. It's not all bad, but a lot of it is, unfortunately. Now, beliefs are created and stored in the 90% of our minds, like I said, in that subconscious mind. And many times we don't even know that they exist. We don't know they've been stored. We don't have a memory or a consciousness of that belief or how it got in there, but we are still acting based on those beliefs. They were developed, a lot of them, many of them were developed from childhood. Most of your subconscious mind is developed before the age of 7. So think about, when we have to really look at why we do what we do, a lot of times we have to go back, way, way, way back. And this is why so much therapy talks about childhood, because this is where we can understand a lot about ourselves. So when you're doing this mindset work, you often have to look back at what you heard or observed in your adolescent years, what your parents believed or other loved ones, how they acted or reacted, how they behaved. This all dictates partially, at minimum, but oftentimes most of, how you behave and what you believe. For instance, your brother insulted you. Your mom was always on a diet or always talking about weight loss. Your dad was never home and never gave you the attention that you were craving. A bully, you were constantly bullied and the bully wouldn't leave you alone. Those moments stick with us and we store them forever sometimes, or at least as long as we don't, kind of dig into them and understand them and choose to believe something else. So you can shift your beliefs, shift your perception, choose another story, but we have to kind of at least be able to get an idea of what might be stored in there before we can actively change it. So as we go through these 4 components, I have 2 different scenarios for you. One is just kind of a random everyday example, and one is my actual experience. First thing, we're talking about the grocery store. Yes, it might seem a little crazy that you would have a belief about the grocery store, but I'm sure there are people out there that do, first of all. And second of all, this is just setting the stage, giving a picture of how it could look in other scenarios. All right, so at one point you went into the grocery store, they didn't have anything you needed, the shelves were bare, it was so crowded, you got bumped into repeatedly, there were carts everywhere, the cashier was rude to you, you had a bad experience and you stored that experience. And now you have the belief that grocery stores are annoying, crowded, full of rude people, have nothing you need, take all your money, whatever the story is. So you stored that one bad experience as being the case, a kind of a blanket statement and fully the truth. Here's my personal example. I'm going to use a money example. I have lots of examples of this, but one interesting one is about money and how I perceived money. So when I grew up, my parents were very budget conscious, which is totally fine, totally normal thing to do. But my parents both had good jobs. We were definitely not fighting to get by any means, and I'm very grateful for that. But we did always have talk about money and saving money, not spending money, trying to get the best deal possible, only buying things on sale. And I stored that. I stored all of that information, and it led me to the belief that money is a limited resource. And you should always be scared or worried or have fear of running out of money. That's how my brain took that information and stored it from the time I was very young. And let me just tell you, I did not even know this was what I believed until probably 3 or 4 years ago when I started really diving into this work. All right, now let's move on. We're going to hold those examples for a second. They're going to come back as we talk about our thoughts. So from there, we create our thoughts. Those beliefs stored in your subconscious mind bubble up into our conscious minds and dictate what we think, whether we know it and we realize it or we have no idea. Remember, your subconscious mind has the only goal of making sure your life matches what you have stored as information, what you have stored to be true. It doesn't want your special order off the menu at the restaurant to come out wrong. That is not a possibility. So it is going to make sure that it reacts accordingly. Here is an example. We're going back to our grocery store. So now every time you think of the grocery store, because you have stored that belief based on that one bad experience, that grocery stores are annoying with, rude people, you now, every time you have to go to the grocery store, every time you pass the grocery store, think, grocery stores, I hate them. They are the worst chore ever. I really try not to go. I hate it. I dread it. This is what you think. These are your thoughts based on your now stored belief about grocery stores. And for me, and my money example, as soon as I basically growing up until, like I said, 3 or 4 years ago, when I realized this belief I had about money, I would always say things like, that's too expensive. I can't afford that. I shouldn't buy that. I can't really buy anything that's not on sale or has a high price tag. No matter how much I want it, I would need it. I would enjoy the heck out of it. It would bring me so much happiness. No matter what, I couldn't buy anything because limited resource, right? Money is limited. I should be scared of losing money and being without money. So now we can see how our beliefs turned into thoughts. And now our thoughts spark emotions. So thoughts that are tied to those beliefs then spark emotions. And it could be something as simple as when you think, oh, I have to run to the grocery store. Going back to the grocery store example. That could either come with excitement if you didn't have this belief that grocery stores are awful, worst chore ever from that one bad experience. But since you had that bad experience and stored it, now you think that it's the worst chore ever. And so when you have to go, it comes with a sense or a feeling of dread. You dread going, you know it's going to be annoying, crowded, even it might be in the middle of the night. You might go when there's nobody there, but you still have that belief. So you're still going to have that feeling of dread or annoyance, or you just don't want to go. You don't want to do it. Ugh, awful. And with my money example, I then had an underlying sense of fear around spending money. Regardless, I always had this fear of losing money, of not having enough money, and this overall negative view of money. I just talked about it a lot. I was worried about it a lot. I checked into my bank accounts a lot. I had this sense of fear. That's really the best way to put it. So these are examples of your thoughts turning into emotions. Now let's look at how our emotions turn into actions. Your emotions dictate how you act. Going back to the grocery store, if you were excited about the grocery store, you didn't have that belief about from that one bad experience, then when you walked in, you would have a smile on your face. You'd be happy to be there. You wouldn't think much of it. You'd say hi to the worker. You feel good. You feel really good. You're in a high vibe place. No negative emotion means no negative experience. Or you have that belief from that one bad experience. Now you don't like going to the grocery store. And so you walk in, you have this feeling of dread when it comes time to go to the grocery store, and you go in grumpy, you rush through, you don't say hi to anybody, you don't apologize when you bump into people, you don't look at the cashier in the eye and ask how they're doing. You're grumpy. You're grumpy. You don't want to be there. It's not a good experience. And obviously, you are then in a low vibe place. In my money example, I had this fear around money. I was scared to spend money. I never bought things that were on sale. I never felt free around money. And consequently, I always had money issues. I had a hard time getting ahead with my bank account and not being in debt, making the money that I wanted to make. I had this whole big story about money that I didn't even know. And then once I released that, I could make the money that I wanted. And we'll go more into that in detail in later episodes because it's a really good story and it really shows how this all works to go for you or against you based on your beliefs. But I think regardless, now we can see why we think what we think. And not only that, but why we have the emotions that we have, why we are negative versus positive in some scenarios of our life or all the time or whatever. Why we act the way we act and react the way we act. Just so much of it makes sense. And it all goes back to those stored beliefs and what your subconscious mind decided to store as true for you, regardless, again, of whether it is true or false, good or bad, all that. So we really need to, and I want this, the whole reason I'm talking about this, and we'll continue to bring this stuff up as we move forward in the Unstuck podcast. I want to spur the desire in you to dig around in your mind and start noticing and understanding what you think, how you react, all that stuff I just talked about. Why do you do what you do? I think this is super important. This is going to, again, because we're in one of these setting the stage episodes, we're going to do that digging here on the show slowly and but surely. It will come up. It's not always fun. I'm not going to lie. I didn't really like to know that I had a fear about money because then it was like, now what do I do? And we'll go through what to do. So don't worry. And also I want to mention that you don't always have to know exactly what your belief is to change it. If you know, I react this way, I act this way, I emote this way, that's often enough to at least get a sense of what you could have stored, and then you can still work to change that, to reverse out of it. So I do want to know, I'm seeing a lot of women in my course, the Unstuck Project, get really caught up on the fact that they don't know exactly what their story is, but that's okay. You can still change so much without knowing that exact story or belief, and really make all the change that you want to see without all the nitty gritty details. So no need to worry, but still, I want you, and this is your action item for this week. Here we go. Ready? I want you to start digging around in there, but it may be a tad overwhelming, or you may not even know, how do I even begin? My suggestion is to go about it backwards. Start noticing. And this is really something I think journaling would be great at the end of the day. Kind of start thinking about maybe a thing or two that was kind of prominent in that day that happened, and go about it backwards. When you did that thing, why did you do it? What emotion did you have when you did it? When you have a thought, what is that connected emotion? Or when you have an emotion, what thought brought that up? This, if you can go about it backwards, again, starting from the bottom and starting with your actions, because I think that's the most obviously noticeable thing that we can see from our everyday life. When you have an action, what thought spurred that action? And then what emotion was behind that thought? And where did that emotion come from as far as your beliefs? Why did that emotion come up in you? Again, take some time, get that journal out, have a warm beverage, a nice cup of tea, and sit down and really think about this. Make this your self-care for today and see what you can come up with, and keep going with it. When you do notice an interesting action, play it backwards. Where did it start? See how far you can go with where it originated. It will do so much good for you. All right, that's it for today, ladies. Thank you so much again for your love, your support, for downloading these episodes, listening, doing the work, everything. It means so much to me as I continue on the pursuit of my passion in helping you be the best version of yourself. If you could, please head over to Instagram, connect with me, send me a message, let me know what's up with you, what you're thinking, what you're struggling with. You can find me at Shawn Miner over on Instagram, Shawn Miner Health on Facebook, and head over to my website too, shawnminer.com. I have a new quiz inspired by the reaction of episode 3 about your emotional vibrations. I now have a quiz for you to see where you sit as far as vibration. Are you high vibe? Are you somewhere in the middle? Or are you low vibe? Head over there, take that, see what you're doing, and see how you can start improving that. And I'll see you back here next week with more information on how to get unstuck. Take care.